On the morning of April the 2nd, 1912, the world witnessed the arrival of a monarch upon the seas. The RMS Titanic had emerged from Belfast, her hull vast and gleaming, declaring herself the largest vessel in existence. She carried over 2,200 souls across the Atlantic, a floating city built to defy the laws of physics. She possessed a reputation for invincibility that seemed woven into the steel of her construction. Captain Edward Smith stood at the helm, aged 62 years, commanding a ship he believed could withstand any storm. He received 7 warnings of sea ice during their voyage, yet they were treated as minor nuisances rather than grave dangers. The vessel moved forward at 22 knots through darkening water, carrying the hopes of nations and the dreams of families. She was an idol of human progress, blind to the icebergs looming in the night that would soon challenge her reputation for immortality. As she glided into history, the ship became more than iron. It became a monument to pride, unaware that the ocean held a cold hunger waiting below. Passengers slept trusting in rivets and bulkheads that promised safety against the deep. The RMS Titanic steamed westward, a monument of human engineering drifting through the vast, indifferent North Atlantic. Captain Edward Smith was 62 years old when he guided this iron leviathan into the night of April 14th. It was not a storm that threatened them, but the quiet accumulation of danger. 7 distinct warnings had been received from ice patrol vessels and other ships ahead. They spoke of fields of pack ice, of floes drifting with the current. Yet, the schedule held firm. The ship maintained her speed at roughly 22 knots, confident in her power against the freezing dark. Then, at 23:40 ship's time, the collision occurred. The hull fractured instantly as 6 of her 16 compartments flooded with freezing seawater. The sinking began not immediately, but with a slow descent, allowing over 2,000 people to remain on board until the ocean claimed them. By dawn on April 15th, the great ship had settled into the depths, leaving 1,500 souls lost in the cold water. It was a catastrophe born not of collision with nature, but of a refusal to heed the quiet voice of warning that echoed across the radio waves before the end. Night falls over the North Atlantic, a vast and indifferent darkness broken only by the engine hum. It is April 14th, 1912. The Titanic moves forward with purpose, cutting through the waves at 22 knots. She remains unaware that the water ahead is stone. At 23:40 ship's time, the silence shatters. A low groan vibrates through the hull as the bow strikes an iceberg, a jagged mountain of frozen sea rising from the black, deep abyss. The impact is not instantaneous death, but a slow awakening to disaster. 6 forward compartments open to the water like wounds on the ocean floor. Water rushes in, seeking its level with terrifying, silent speed. Captain Edward Smith stands upon his bridge, 62 years old, watching the horizon while the ship he commands begins to list. The warnings received over the preceding days are forgotten in the sudden violence of impact. Over 2,000 souls remain unaware that their vessel is filling up. It will be only 2 hours and 40 minutes before she sinks. The ship opens her bow to the sea, surrendering to the elements she was built to conquer. The night deepens slowly, and the tragedy begins in quiet precision. Beneath the vast, indifferent sky of the North Atlantic, profound silence descended upon the disaster zone. The Titanic had struck the ice and begun her fatal descent, sending frantic wireless calls into the void. Yet nearby, drifting in the darkness, the SS Californian remained unaware. They were within sight of the burning ship, yet they did not know to wake their operators. This critical failure stemmed from a single operator on duty aboard the Californian, while the Titanic maintained a continuous watch with multiple staff. The distress signals were heard as noise rather than a cry for aid, lost in the static of the night. 2 hours and 20 minutes passed until the great liner vanished beneath the waves, taking over 1,000 souls with her. It was a tragedy compounded not just by ice but by isolation. Captain Smith's final voyage ended in darkness, while another vessel drifted safely within view. The world would later debate the implications of this wireless negligence, asking how silence could claim so many lives when help lay mere miles away. 16 compartments opened to the sea, yet the message remained unheard. Technology failed to bridge the gap between the living and the lost. In the cold, crushing darkness of that April night, the greatest ship afloat met its inevitable end as water breached her hull, entering 6 of her 16 watertight compartments in a fatal breach of safety design. The vessel did not merely drift, she succumbed to the sea with terrifying speed and gravity. Over 2,200 souls had embarked, trusting steel and rivets that could not save them. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, the bow dipped into the Atlantic, leaving behind Captain Edward Smith, 62 years of age, amidst the chaos below decks, while the ship listed heavily to starboard. By dawn, the RMS Carpathia gathered the scattered survivors, rescuing 710 lives while the rest were lost to the freezing depths. The final toll stood at over 1,500 passengers and crew perishing in the cold water, making it stand as one of history's deadliest peacetime maritime disasters. 7 warnings of sea ice had preceded this tragedy, yet the design could not withstand the impact. It remains a monument to hubris where over half of those aboard found their final resting place in the deep, held by the silence of the ocean for decades before the truth finally rose from the wreckage. Dawn breaks over the North Atlantic as the RMS Carpathia pulls alongside the drifting wreckage of a lost world, bringing life back into the freezing dark where hope had nearly faded. By 9:15 on April 15th, the rescue is complete. 710 souls stand upon the deck, their lives preserved against odds that claimed so many more in the hours before the ship vanished. In a single night, over 1,600 people had perished, swallowed by the bow opening to the churning sea below them. Captain Edward Smith remained with his vessel until its final descent into the abyss of the ocean. Now silence returns to the water, broken only by the quiet intake of breath from those saved. They have been gathered from the icy spray where death waited patiently for them all. The warnings of ice had passed unheeded in the luxury of speed and haste that defined this voyage. Yet here they are, witnesses to a catastrophe that would redefine maritime safety forever. As the Carpathia steams slowly toward New York, carrying the survivors across the Atlantic, the tragedy concludes with a quiet dignity and relief. The ocean keeps its secrets once more, but the human cost remains etched in the memory of the age, a permanent scar upon the history of mankind.